Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to welcome you here this evening on this rather wet night. We're really pleased to have so many of you here to this event, which is hosted jointly by the Student Law Society and the Centre for Information Rights. My name is Marion Oswald, and I'm the Director of the Centre for Information Rights, which was established in 2012 as a focus for research in the area of technology and information law, and our aim to bring together academics, students, policymakers, practitioners, members of the public together. And I think we've achieved that certainly this evening. Before I hand over to Charlie Dugdale, who's the president of our Student Law Society, to welcome our amazing guest speaker tonight, just a few administrative announcements. No fire alarm is scheduled, so if we do have some sort of very loud sounding bell, please could everybody exit either through that door there or up the stairs. And we are hoping that our refreshments will still be there after the talk, so please do stay and finish the drink and have a chat. So I'll now hand over to Charlie.
Hi, thank you all for coming this evening. It's really great to see you all here. I've been given the honour of introducing Christina. I've had to make notes because what I need to say spans so much that I simply can't remember it all. As has been said, I am the president of the Student Law Society here at Winchester, and our aims this year are to try and make everyone a bit more employable. So our focus is on employability, which is really interesting considering Christina's aims for her presidential year as well. So Christina is the 174th president of the Law Society, but just the 5th woman to hold this position, which I think is quite an achievement in itself. Christina studied jurisprudence at Oxford and then qualified as a solicitor in 1991. Moving on from there, she managed several law firms, including, which I find quite interesting, a virtual law firm. And so in 2011, Christina set up the Cooperative Legal Services, which is a family law division. She became then the Director of Policy. Just keep looking just to make sure I have done this correctly. More recently, she has been the Director of Innovation at the top 100 law firm, Cripps LLP, which again I think is quite an interesting position to have held. So for her presidential year, Christina has 4 aims. The first being diversity and inclusion, and I'm sure most of you are aware that it's something that our Law Society as well feels very passionate about. Christina's focus is on social mobility and women in leadership in the law. Her second aim is the future of the profession, including legal technology, which I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit more about this evening. Thirdly, it's promoting access to justice for all. Again, something that I'm sure we've all been reading about in recent weeks. And lastly, Christina's focus is on mental health and well-being in the legal profession. Again, something I know that is being promoted quite heavily here at Winchester as well. I think I've probably made Christina sit through enough about herself, so I'm going to hand over to Christina for the rest of this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion and Charlie. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, after that sort of introduction, all I can be to you now is a disappointment. So I'm glad that so many of you have still got a glass of wine in your hands. And I'm delighted to be here. As Charlie said, I'm the 5th woman out of 174, which I always say that all we need now is 169 years of female presidents, and we've got it evened up. But in any event, I don't know, who wants to be a solicitor here? Anyone? One man over 2? Okay. Let me tell you a little bit about the Law Society. You never know, it might convince some other of you. So the Law Society is the representative body of the solicitors in England and Wales. 185 on last count, 185,000 solicitors. And it's our job to promote, support and represent solicitors. And we do this domestically and internationally, trying to ensure that globally the law of England and Wales is used as governing law, and that we try to attract companies from all over the world to come to the UK to resolve their disputes. We also look globally again to try and support our global law firms, and 7 out of the top 10 largest global law firms have a headquarter in the UK. So it is a big business for the international profession. We earn for the country about £30 billion per annum, and we have net exports of about 4 billion, so we're doing our bit to reduce the debt. We also employ nearly 400,000 people in this country, so that represents about 1.6% of GDP. But we're not just a trade, we are a profession, and our commitment to professional standards, to the highest ethics, and to defending the rule of law is absolutely key. And one of the things that I'm most proud about is that the solicitors profession donates over 3 million hours per year to pro bono activity. So that's just a sort of flavour of the profession. The Law Society, as I say, has a global role, but it also has a key domestic role as well, and that is to engage with government in all its forms to try and ensure that the rule of law is protected, but also that we have the right legislative and regulatory framework. So we look to influence and engage, particularly around access to justice, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later on. So the Law Society is governed by a council, and it's a council of 100 people, and that provides the electoral college for the president or the office holders of the Law Society. So I was elected about 2.5 years ago, actually a little bit longer than that, to the role of Deputy Vice President, and then you succeed to Vice President and on to President, I think, unless you do something absolutely appalling. And they haven't found me out yet. So I have had a good 2 years running, and that's the context really to the work that we have been doing at the Law Society, because these sorts of programmes don't happen overnight. And I wanted to talk to you this evening a little bit about technology and the law and the future of legal services, and I'll probably say a little bit about some of the issues that are engaged there, because I think that that's of interest to the audience. And then I'll talk about our Women in Leadership and Law programme, access to justice, and then we'll see how we go. I'll probably run out of steam, or you'll get bored. But certainly, please do ask me any questions that you want to ask as we go along. And I think we have a roving mic somewhere. She says, looking about the room. Yes, where is it?
He's at your end.
He's looking. Yeah.
Where will be found?
Yeah, okay. And I think if there's no questions during my talk, if you allow me to monologue, then we'll have a Q&A session afterwards. So let me tell you a little bit about artificial intelligence, because this is, in our view at the Law Society, is going to have widespread effects on the law, on legal services and on policy making. Algorithms are already being used extensively, and therefore key legal concepts such as transparency, explainability and accountability are crucial in this. Big data, machine learning in all its formats, algorithmic determination and similar emerging technologies have the potential to bring considerable benefits to individuals, to groups and to society as a whole, but obviously the reverse is also true. And it's this power which should concern us. The law acts as a container of power, subjecting it to its rules. In effect, this is what we mean by the rule of law, and algorithms should be no exception to this. The UK government has identified the growth of AI as a strategic opportunity, and this is the industrial strategy and the grand challenges. And different departments have committed resources and have embedded AI into their response to the industrial strategy. This ambition, of course, is very positive, but I suggest that it is up to us as lawyers to develop the necessary checks and balances. So how can we begin to explore this issue of algorithms, transparency, accountability and the law? Emerging technologies change and challenge existing legal frameworks, and they require us to quite radically rethink how we deliver our work as lawyers. So for these purposes, I'm thinking of AI as essentially statistical-based pattern recognition, and it's something that we use every day. When I'm talking to a group of practicing lawyers and I ask them if they're using AI, there's only a couple of them who put their hands up, but actually as 85% of adults in this country own a smartphone, as soon as you look on Google, you are using AI, or perhaps AI is using you. But it's the brains behind our devices. It is what curates our world of endless opportunities, and it points us in the right direction for what we need and want, because we have needed and wanted it before. So we are in constant communication with AI. It is ubiquitous, and it helps us obviously to optimise our time by giving us the information we want quickly and accurately, but it does, I suggest, present ethical, moral and legal challenges. An example is bias. Bias can occur and can be embedded in automated decision making, as the data sets that are used to design and to train autonomous systems are often biased themselves. They reflect society. Society is biased. And this is particularly true of uncurated data sets when they form the bedrock of an AI development. Humans have created those data sets, but algorithms will take those biases and potentially amplify them and hardwire them. Companies are using AI to predict everything from creditworthiness to preferred cancer treatments, but the technology has blind spots, and this can affect different and often vulnerable groups in society. Facebook, as an example, has come into focus recently because their algorithms became unable to discern between real news and fake news, and this not only interferes with the news flow, but it influences public opinion, and potentially that is even at the ballot box. As we know, algorithms can move markets. The pound dropped by 6% in 2016 June. It was triggered by algorithmic decision-making around currency trends. An additional concern is around transparency. Transparency is a basic principle of justice, the requirement to be able to explain and to justify the reasons for a decision, and this applies across all fields, both in the public sphere and also within organisations. But as AI grows more advanced, it becomes more difficult to make sense of its inner workings. And as these systems, particularly those who have unsupervised learning, are self-organising, they are inherently without external guidance. So, in making decisions about what to include or exclude in an output, algorithms usually have to go through a step which prioritises information. The data an AI system is trained on may well include, as I said before, systemic bias. So that outcome could result, for example, in disfavourable racial profiling and entrenching existing biases. One of the key concerns that we have is that there is at present no universal professional standards for data science, and I would suggest that there is an urgent need to create such standards against which individuals can adhere to build confidence in the use of algorithmic systems, especially within legal contexts. The role of ethics in the conduct of electronic interactions between people, businesses and things raises challenges around the moral implications or perhaps the unintended consequences that result from the coming together of different technological systems and humans. Big data, cloud and autonomous systems provoke questions around security, privacy and fundamental freedoms, whilst AI and social media challenge us as to how we define how we value work and each other. The global distribution of data centres, data sources and intelligent systems means that there is limited control of the data or its intentions outside of our borders. There are also urgent and I suggest systemic debates to be had about the ethics of AI systems. So some of these are around some very serious questions. Are we as a society content with AI that kills? Military applications are inevitable, including lethal autonomous weapons, which might incite new arms races, lower the threshold for nations to go to war, or give terrorists and assassins new tools for violence. AI techniques can be used to launch cyber attacks, and facial recognition, sentiment analysis and data mining algorithms can be used to discriminate against disfavoured groups or to invade individuals' privacy. Liability and accountability is another concern. Should AI developers be liable for damage caused by their product? The trouble is that AI systems are highly likely to interact with other systems and sensors in an Internet of Things, so assigning liability becomes incredibly difficult. As I said before, they're fundamentally also reliant upon the data upon which they have been trained. But with many systems, you can, as part of your development of the system, you continue to train it. So there are risks there, and risks, of course, in relation to hacking. Another question, another legal question that we're interested in is whether AI and robots could become sufficiently advanced to deserve electronic personhood in the future. In 2016, a committee of the European Parliament found that rights and responsibilities should be defined analogous to corporate personhood, so allowing firms to take part in legal cases both as plaintiff and as respondent. The committee made it clear that this wasn't about giving robots rights, but really, in effect, a legal fiction to make the application of these issues to current law easier. Nonetheless, this provides potentially a massive disruption to social and economic norms. So to start to address all of these issues, and she's finally getting on to slide one, we have set up a Technology and Law Policy Commission. The Commission is an opportunity, I think, to examine the current and the future use of algorithms and big data in the justice system and England and Wales. I mean, the implications of this on human rights, on fundamental freedoms, and on the rule of law. So the questions we're looking at is how can we ensure that algorithmic determination is fair, is ethical, is free from bias, and to also consider who is liable if a decision by an algorithm leads to a negative or a harmful consequence. The way that we have set the Commission up is that we have tried to convene everybody who has some interest and something to say in this. So we have brought together lawyers, academics, technologists, ethicists, policymakers, government, judges, you name it, people who, and civil society, I should add to that, people who have an interest and who have something to say. I'm privileged to be able to chair this commission, but my co-commissioners are a professor of ethics and a professor of computer science. And the methodology that we're using is that we have asked for evidence, both written and oral, and you can imagine that that has led to an enormous amount of information being given to us. We've had one-to-one meetings with people who can speak to this evidence, and we also have had live evidence sessions. And thank you, Marion, who has not only given evidence but has been a witness at one of these sessions. We run them a bit like a select committee, so we have about 15 witnesses, and we, the commissioners, get to ask them really tricky questions. So it actually makes for good theatre. If you're interested in this, then everything is on our website, including videos of the last two sessions. The first was primarily focused around the academic community, the second around the techies. The third one will be held in Cardiff, I think it's on the 7th of February. The fourth one will be on Valentine's Day, so you can't forget that. And what better way to spend it than coming to the Law Society to listen to what will be more of a focus around civil society and the views of civil society in relation to this. What we're going to do is curate all of this insight and evidence, and then look to produce a report in the spring for government in relation to these issues. So if anybody is interested in that, please do see me afterwards with a glass of wine of my own. At this early stage of our investigation, a number of themes or issues have emerged. Firstly, that many of the algorithmic tools that are already being used in our justice system, and Marion's research is very much focused on the HEART tool being used by Durham Constabulary, and there are others as well, so policing is a big focus here. But they are almost all escape the safeguards and the scrutiny constraints introduced by the General Data Protection Regulation. And we believe that scrutiny should extend to all automated systems that are used within our justice system. This is just too important not to. So registration of particular uses of algorithmic tools, which should provide continuous access and now scrutiny is likely to be one of our recommendations. Secondly, that prediction tools are likely to have the most immediate impact on our justice system. There are, particularly in the United States, where the data is easier to mine in relation to court decision making, there are some prediction tools which the makers say can determine before which judge, using which advocate, in which type of case, using which arguments, which sentiments, and which gender of advocate actually as well is likely to succeed, and what percentage there is of that. So I often people say, oh well, there's a lot of inaccuracy here. We have to remember that what we have now is the worst it's ever going to be. These tools are only going to get better in the sense of accuracy. I'm not making any other type of judgment about them. So the concern here is a jurisprudential one, which is that if what this means is that less cases are going to be coming to court, although initially it seems quite attractive to have greater certainty, and therefore that might be good for clients and consumers. But let us say if you've got a case and you're told it's got a 52% chance of success, and you decide that is not enough, then there is a concern that what this could lead to is less cases coming to court, certainly few outlier cases, and therefore, in effect, a seizing up of the way that common law is developed. So our organic process of developing the common law through case law and jurisprudence, in other words, that the prediction tools used in litigation could end up, in effect, destroying what they're based on. So this is a key concern of ours, and we need to investigate the intended, unintended consequences of these tools in relation to our justice system. And our final concern, as things stand at the moment, and I re-emphasise that these are just very initial thoughts, much better and certainly better argued ideas will be coming out in the paper in the spring. But the final issue is that almost all of these tools are being developed by corporations for commercial purpose. And there is therefore very little public interest scrutiny or consideration in the design of the algorithms, or indeed in relation to what the algorithms are exposed to. And if I think about Amazon's recommendation system, which obviously is designed to maximise sales, we can imagine, can't we, another system which is designed perhaps to increase consumers' understanding so that they can make better informed decisions, which might be a much more public interest approach to this. But nobody is designing these. In fact, the whole world is, in some senses, being run by 8 corporations, 5 in the United States and 3 in China. So it is a very precarious situation for us to be in if we're looking at things from a public service perspective. Any questions about that, Sophia? I'll move.
Sorry, first.
Yeah, sure.
Much of what you've described suggests to me a sort of depersonalisation of the justice system, whereby everything can be I was going to say decided on paper, but quite the opposite actually, decided in the ether somewhere, decided on cyber paper. But to what extent, therefore, does the necessity of bringing people in person before other people to judge their demeanour, to judge what they say, how it's said, in probably fairly short order, rather than massively long sort of investigative, let's follow the paper type situations. What role will that have in the future? Because I mean that, to many people, for many years, millennia perhaps, has been justice.
Yes.
What you're describing is something which none of us really recognise as traditional justice. It might be justice, but we don't probably recognise it as such.
And I think that's a really good and challenging question. It's a question for us as society. You know, what do we want from our justice system? What we have always had is that appearance in court, looking into somebody's eyes and assessing, as you say, their demeanour and whether they're a credible witness. There's some really clever AI, which is actually potentially, it's the people who produce it say it is much more accurate than people at assessing the veracity and at understanding people's emotions through their facial responses. There's another piece of AI, and I don't think they really understand how it works, but it is about 40% more accurate than a human at assessing people's sexuality from their photos. So I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that this is what we want from our justice system. But with these tools out there, these are issues that we need to face into. So what do we want from justice? What can and should it look like? I think that nobody would say what we have at the moment is the best that we could possibly have, because lots of people feel that they are disempowered. It's a very asymmetric relationship between an individual and the state, or an individual and the law, and that it is therefore something that a lot of people, apparently according to the SRA statistics, will not access justice. They will not seek to have their legal issues resolved. So I'm not advocating for any particular approach, but I think we need to respond to these tools that are now being used within the justice system, not currently within the judicial system, but within the justice system. Yeah.
I had a question in relation to, you said that we might need the less cases going to court. Could we argue that that's already happening due to the fact that, for example, legal aid and a certain sort of access to people, due to not being able to have the money to be able to have access to the courts, would the technology at some level be able to facilitate that access to those less financially better off?
One of the things that I'm really interested in developing is a piece of research around that, to see if the technologies can be used in a way which enables and empowers people to self-help, so that they can access justice and that they can hopefully resolve their own issues. But if they can't resolve them, then they get to a point where they understand that they need expert legal advice, and fingers crossed that there are some mechanism to support them to get that, whether that be legal aid or insurance, or that they have a good enough case that a lawyer will take it on a no-win, no-fee basis, whatever it is. But yes, I think that we must look at that opportunity, that possibility, and indeed that's one of the things, she says, segueing back to her. Hang on a minute. Technology. Yeah, I've talked about that, haven't I? Here we are. One of the things that I am hoping that we will look at through the LawTech delivery panel. So the LawTech delivery panel is another thing that I chair actually, but this is a government panel. And it has at the moment quite a commercially focused purpose. So really it is twofold. First of all, to build an attractive and sustainable and vibrant LawTech industry in this country. So to attract inward investment and to support growth to scale of the new developing industry. The second, and I think equally important aim of the panel is to ensure that we have the right legislative and regulatory frameworks, and that goes from sort of primary legislation to regulation to standards and codes, so we've got the right matrix for the right issues. And again, that's building on the industrial strategy and the Global Britain campaign, which is to ensure that the UK, irrespective of Brexit, can continue to be a global force in law. So that's the purpose of the LawTech Delivery Panel. It also has a sort of longer arch purpose, which is to look at skills acquisition and legal education, to make sure that we are training people and allowing them, enabling them to acquire skills that support the work of 21st century lawyers. And again, I can tell you more about that, but my aspiration for that panel is that we will be able to move into more in the access to justice area, to see and to explore the extent to which new and emerging technologies can be part, never the whole solution, but part of the solution around the access to justice issues. The final thing I wanted to tell you about in relation to technology, before I go on to the other things, and maybe I'll just give anybody else who wants to ask a techie question the chance to do it now, but is about our partnership with Barclays Bank. So we partnered with Barclays, which is supported by about a dozen of the largest law firms, some academic institutions, PwC and others. And the purpose of this partnership was to set up the first industry-specific LawTech incubator, which we have done in the summer in Notting Hill. So we have 16 LawTech startups there, and we will be building on that. And it's an important foundation stone, but there is much more that we can do with this. What we're trying to achieve is to, in effect, demystify LawTech for the profession, so that we can build a community of technologists and lawyers, so that lawyers can engage and influence with the development of the products and services that the technologists and the tech businesses are putting together, and so that lawyers from all walks of life can play a part in this. At the moment, there are incubators, but they're behind the closed doors of the 10 largest law firms in the country. We want to open source this a lot more. We also want lawyers to be in a position to make well-informed decisions about three things primarily, I think: their careers and what they need, what skills they need to undertake their careers, their businesses and what technology they can use, and if used correctly, a lot of this new technology can be a real game changer. It can enable smaller businesses to really punch above their weights and compete against much larger businesses, but also to equip them to be able to support and advise their clients better, because they are all facing into the same technological challenges as law firms are. So there'll be a whole raft of information, advice, support and guidance that is coming out of that, and we'll be doing things like LawTech cafes where we go up and down the country, giving opportunities for lawyers all over England and Wales to get up close and personal with the technology in a way that is hopefully not very intimidating, because I know one thing we lawyers hate is being shown up as not knowing something. So it's really, really important that we give everyone that chance. So that's what I was going to say about technology. Any other questions or comments about that before I quickly move on to another thing?
One quick question. Imagine that technology evolves and we reach the point where we can develop machine learning systems that can produce perfect results with no bias and no errors. Thus can affect issues of our daily lives in a perfect manner. Are we content if we leave these decisions on the machines? I mean, is there something inherently unethical in this?
And that's a really good question. I mean, I'd say this is a thought experiment, because I don't think that you will ever have infallible machines. So, but yes, if you could guarantee better decision making by a machine, would we still want to have a human making decisions? And I expect that that's something that will develop. Society will change and move on as the technology does become better. I mean, would I mind if a machine was making a decision about a parking fine? Probably not. If it was making a decision at this point about my liberty, probably I would be very unhappy about that. If there was compelling evidence that said that if I went to a algorithmic judge as opposed to a human judge, and I was going to get a much fairer hearing from the algorithmic judge, because the human judge has all of the biases that each of us hold and carry around. I think it's I'm not sure what I would do, but it's a really interesting question. Sorry.
Bit of coming from a perspective that I'm currently on a paper on AI doing law, but not necessarily doing justice. I think it would be curious for me to know, since you had the opportunity to talk to techies and gain those different perspectives, what is the overall feeling of this? Is it, I know that, for example, we take the law as a set of rules. We know that an AI works with rules, and that my brain works. And when it comes to morality and ethics that you mentioned, there is that gap that we're not sure, well, we are sure that AI can't necessarily do that. So when it comes to bridging that gap, what is the discussions currently that are happening moving forward?
Yes.
In my mind, I do have sort of a couple of solutions, but I'm not sure whether.
So I think the conversation has moved on from probably a couple of years ago, when a lot of the tech developers say we want no regulation, we want to be able to just develop our products and services without any frameworks or anything like that. I think the game changed a bit with GDPR, where what I think a growing understanding, perhaps a more sophisticated understanding of the fact that there is a potentially gold standard and an internationally accepted gold standard, which may actually make their products and services more internationally attractive. So I think that there is that sort of growing awareness and understanding that it probably is a good thing to have regulatory and ethical frameworks in the development of the products, and I think this is something that we will increasingly demand, because the opportunity for AI to wreak havoc at scale is something that is unprecedented. So we do need, we don't develop medicines without frameworks, we don't develop engineering products or agricultural products without frameworks. We definitely should have those for AI as well. Okay, I'm going to move on, and I'm conscious of time, but I wanted to at least tell you about our Women in Leadership in Law project, because I'm really excited about it. So let me start with a little bit of history. So this woman here, Gwyneth Bebb, I'll tell you her story because she was quite an amazing woman. In 1913, this is a bit embarrassing as a president of the Law Society. Law Society does not come out well in this story. But in 1913, Gwyneth Bebb took the Law Society to court for a declaration that she be determined to be a person, because she was not, women were not considered to be people within the legislation, Solicitors Act at the time. The Law Society fought the case tooth and nail, and in fact prevailed in the Court of Appeal, so Gwyneth lost. And indeed it took another 6 years and the intervention of a world war before the legislation was passed, which was the 1919 Sex Disqualification (Removal) Act, which was a promissory piece of legislation that enabled women to become lawyers. In fact, it's a really sad story because Gwyneth Bebb was about to become the first female to be called to the bar. Just before that, she died tragically at 31 in childbirth. So, but she would have been, I'm sure, quite an amazing lawyer. And the second woman is Carrie Morrison, and another quick story from history. So Carrie Morrison was one of 4 women who passed their solicitors' finals in 1922. And the Law Society had the dilemma of working out which woman was to have the honour of being named the first female solicitor. So how do you think they worked this out? Well, it wasn't on who came top, or alphabetically, or age, or anything like that. What they decided to do, quite unbelievably, is to have a running race. So these 4 women, who are all, got top firsts from the colleges, were lined up at the top of Chancery Lane and made to run to the Law Society halls. And the first one through the door was Carrie Morrison. So she was the fastest and therefore the first woman solicitor. And the reason why I mention the 1919 Act is because obviously next year is our centenary, and we want to celebrate and commemorate this. And we're going to be doing it in a number of different ways, and working very closely with another project called the First 100 Years Project. And we will be producing, we're collating an archive for the British Library. There is so little documented information about women in the law, precious, precious little, and we're trying to pull everything together so that we can retain it, because if it's not documented, like most of women's history, it will just disappear. We're also going to be producing a book next year, again, be available for Christmas 2019, lovely coffee table book with lots of pictures in it to give to all your female friends and relatives in the law, but again to celebrate and commemorate our history. So that's the positive reason. The rather more negative reason why we decided to focus on women in leadership in law is that unfortunately, despite women representing approximately 2/3 of the new entrants into the solicitor's profession for every one of the last 30 years, if you look at big law firms, you will struggle to find 15% female ownership. 11, 12, 13% is still very, very common. So this is something that's systemic. It is something that has not resolved itself, not sort of come out in the wash, and requires the sort of attention that systemic change needs. So we decided to, first of all, try and find out why. So we undertook a survey, and the survey ended up being the largest ever survey on this issue. It's international. We syndicated it through LexisNexis and the International Bar Association to around 120 countries, and it gave us a whole host of really interesting insights. So